The 8th studio album from the Australian-based psychedelic rock group King Gizzard and the Lizard Wizard instantaneously goes down as one of this year's most unusual, different, yet all the more welcoming albums that have been released so far this year. Forgetting the fact that this is a group who have dropped 8 studio albums within a 6-year period, this album goes above and beyond what you'd expect from any act. Described as a never-ending album, that definition is to be believed in every regards. The title Nonagon Infinity referencing the fact that this 9-track album listens as one continuous loop. In other words, it flows so seamlessly that once the final track ends, it instantaneously goes straight back to the opener, and unless you've listened to this album on a continuous cycle, you wouldn't know when it began or ended. Musically, the album stays at the same key signature all throughout, providing similar sounding motifs and very rarely shifts in tempo, yet not to the point where everything's unrecognisable. The band does enough to make the tracks distinguishable enough. Not only that, but the unusual shift in time signatures, introduction of instruments such as harmonicas, flutes, synthesizers and a theremin. Every single track is overflowing with superbly crafted rhythms and hooks, maintaining a constant flow of energy and visceralness that keeps the listener gripped with every passing moment. The drums have a rather manic quality that they never let up once. They're even given a chance to shine on some of these tracks and have their own instrumental solos, and when they are coupled with the multiple electric guitar melodies, what's being provided is a head-banging sensation that never really lets up. And it's not as though you have one unique melody in each song. Sometimes you are presented with 3, 4, 5, sometimes more melodies per track. The band doesn't hold back in guaranteeing to live up to this album's namesake, and let's not forget the bass all throughout, which can change up from having a great bounce and groove to it to having a real heaviness and provide some of these tracks with a thick underlying layer. But these driving guitars are not alone. As I said, you have the harmonicas, which have a real harshness and gravelly sound, most notable on tracks like Robot Stop, which also has this real Australian flair to it, especially in instrumental breaks, and on the track Big Fig Wasp. You have the flute making an appearance on the track Gamma Knife, and the theremin provides an off-kilter digital sound on plenty of tracks, which weirdly enough, despite these things not exactly providing the kindest of noises, I personally not being a big fan of these things, they're an oddly welcoming presence here, and they match the tone of this album rather well, as does the brief acoustic guitar on the song Wah Wah. Quality of the album has a rather lo-fi production to it as well, thankfully not to the point where the instrumentation becomes too muddy that it all becomes a humongous wall of incoherentness, although it does tend to play on the vocal deliveries, which at point can make deciphering the lyrics somewhat tricky. Lyrically, the album doesn't have any sort of overriding themes. The opening track Robot Stop reads as an invitation for the listener to go wild and quote, fuck shit up, often repeating the line Nonagon Infinity opens the door, a line that keeps being brought up throughout this album, the beginning of the endless loop if you will. Big Fig Wasp referencing a hornet-like creature that grows inside of fruit before ending the track on a similar song structure as Robot Stop. The track Gamma Knife, which is an advanced method of surgical treatment used to deal with small to medium-sized brain tumours, is pretty much the lead singer demanding to retain his youth. Although not clear enough, I think People Vultures is supposed to be this one-on-one with God, and the singer asking himself whether he has anything to say to God, and how others in the same scenario would spew anything for salvation's sake. Mr. Beat, one of the more funkier tracks on the album, can only read as a psychedelic trip because none of the 3 verses read as having any sort of cohesion whatsoever, and the song's fucking awesome because of it. The longest song on the album, Evil Death Roll, has this very dark, almost underworld sort of aura where our lead is being stalked by some slithery demonesque type creature, yet decides to just start killing everything that they both see. The song Invisible Face continues on from Evil Death Roll in that the lyrics are pretty much repeating the pre-chorus and sees our singer more than likely being under the effects of some psychedelic substance. The penultimate track, Wah Wah, continues this theme of demonic creatures, which include 16-eyed bats, wolves with whips, and goats brandishing pitchforks. Kinda silly, but it works. And the final track, Road Train, which has this addictive chugging feeling to it instrumentally, ends the demonic theme and the album with what I can only describe as a juggernaut of a train being driven by Satan and is driving you to your final destination, only for Nonagon Infinity opens the door to return again, and for the psychedelic trip to wear off before we all begin over again with Robot Stop. So yeah, those are the 9 tracks in a nutshell, and it's one hell of an addictive trip. This is an album that not only warrants repeated listens, primarily because it pretty much dictates that you will listen to nothing else ever again, but it deserves to be played on repeated listen due to the craft, the wildness of the instruments, the use of numerous time signatures, the number of melodies, hooks and motifs. To put it bluntly, if you couldn't tell already, this album is simply fantastic and I cannot recommend it to you enough. Overall, I score this album an 89 out of 100.